Is this recording? Here we go. We're doing a quick test. Let's see if it works. Nice echo effect. All right, we're just doing an audio test. My control panel indicates that I am talking. It says I am connected to audio. Let this chug along until somebody else joins. I can see the stop recording button is active. It says I'm talking. And now I'm going to hit stop recording. This is Jerry from Biznet. I'm here with Alyssa. We're going to kick off our third in a series of weekly Biznet Bootcamp webinars, covering various topics within our marketing automation platform. Today's topic is workflows. Hopefully you can all hear me. We do welcome calls or questions during the session. You can use, I think it appears on your end as a questions panel within the GoToWebinar interface. Feel free to submit any questions you have then. That being said, I think we're going to get things started. As I said, today's topic is workflows. I'm Jerry. Alyssa's here with me in the room. If you've been to any of our live bootcamp sessions, you've both seen us and met us. But on the chance you need to follow up with either of us, either during the webinar or afterwards, here's our contact information. Who you are. These webinars are intended for our current SharpSpring marketing automation clients. Most likely you've attended a bootcamp live session. If not, that's okay. You're welcome here still. You're most likely using marketing automation, either in a do-it-yourself mode or with additional service and support from us. You've got to log into SharpSpring, and you're probably on here because, admittedly, we pack a lot into our 4-hour bootcamp sessions, and people, these sessions are intended for follow-up on kind of deep dive specific topics. Again, these are an extension of the live sessions. We try to keep these short. We hold them every Thursday at 2 p.m. Try to keep them 30 minutes in length, figuring, people can even multitask and, spend 30 minutes just to get some refresher training. Just part of it, just to let you know, for these sessions, we use that same test environment we do for the live bootcamp. We are recording this session. We'll make them available. And as I said, if you have any questions, I think the slide says use the chat feature, but it's actually a questions panel on your side. So today's topic is creating workflows within SharpSpring. Before we get started, if anybody has any questions, shout them out or submit them, and we'll continue moving on. First things first when it comes to workflows. Workflows are really one of the essential elements for automation, the other one being tasks. And workflows and tasks work kind of in tandem. Just as a mnemonic device, I like to think of workflows, which starts with a W, as what we want to do with our prospects. Those of you who attended last week's session will recall that I kind of gave a similar mnemonic device for tasks, saying the T in task stands for what they want to do, what they do, they being your leads, your contacts, people who interact with you via email or the website. Workflows, the W in workflows is what we want to do. Workflows are much more straightforward than tasks. Tasks can be kind of mind-blowing and complicated, but workflows tend to be more straightforward. One of the beauties of workflows is that they can be repurposed. For example, you could create a workflow that sends an alert email to somebody, and you could reuse that over and over and over again based upon different tasks that you have. And as I said, workflows complete the cycle. When prospects behave a certain way, you define those with tasks, and then when you want to do something with those prospects based upon those behaviors, you create workflows. First things first, part two. Here's some examples of kind of a task workflow combinations. For example, you may set up a task that says when a lead receives an email and opens it, Okay, that's what they did. What do we would now want to do? We want to send a follow-up email 2 days later. So we would create a workflow that would be in combination with that task. Or conversely, you may have a task that says when somebody visits an important page on the website, you want to send a notification email to a salesperson. You would configure that notification via a workflow. Another example, you may have a, oh, I got a typo there, but you may set up a task so that when somebody completes a form, you then want to add them to a list and potentially a campaign. For example, you may have a form, it's a registration form to attend an event, for example. You could then say anybody who completes the form, add them to the list registrants list and the campaign for the event. Jumping ahead of myself. So with that being said, I am going to bump out of here and log into our SharpSpring instance. Bear with me here. And as I said, I'm going to go into our Biznet Bootcamp environment. We've got a task that we created last week. I'll just quickly view that task for those who weren't around last week. For those of you who are, I apologize for the bit of redundancy here. Oops, I'm still in the Biznet Digital environment. Let me get to Bootcamp. So I'm going to go to tasks. We'll just take a quick look at what is this task that we built. Here. No, I apologize. Let me jump back into Biznet. Okay, I apologize for that. Here's the Bootcamp webinar task that we have created. What this essentially says, this task quickly says, when somebody visits this important page that we created, we called it contact, when they visit it one time, and they come from an email that we sent, and they have chosen a particular team color. So we've set some parameters around what somebody did, what an end user did, their behaviors. Now what we want to do is then, based upon this action, this set of behaviors, we're going to want to trigger a workflow that does something with those folks. So I've created the task. Now I need to go look at the workflow that I've created. And I'll pull that up. Webinar workflows here. And what I did was created a workflow that says I want to send a congratulations email to people who execute that series of tasks. And I want to send a notification email to myself. So we'll go look at how I constructed that. First thing, I say this during training, and I tell it to everybody I come in contact with. It's kind of a best practice, and it'll keep you sane when you name your tasks and workflows. It's not putting the entire word workflow in the name of the workflow. Putting that, I use WF. Talk about a couple of these fields. This field here, create a time-based workflow utilizing a custom field. You can, if you've created a custom field that uses a date or a time picker, use that to execute when a workflow would fire. For example, I created one, a field that I added to the form called Join the Team, that somebody, when they completed the form, would have to indicate the day and time. So I could then use that to trigger when this workflow would fire. So if you're doing something that's very time sensitive, that's something that you could take advantage of. I'm actually going to turn it off in this case. But this join the team is a custom field we created that's a date time picker. This makes this workflow available in Contact Manager feature. By default, anytime I see this checkbox in SharpSpring, I turn it on because invariably, you know, you come to find you want these things, workflows and fields and emails and all that stuff to be available in Contact Manager. So I tend to turn it on by default. This event section down here is workflows, is where you put together the actions that you want the workflow to initiate. There's a whole variety of options available to you under this drop-down menu here. For example, you can send an email. You can send a notification to, in this case, the email recipient. You can send a notification to a user. You can post events back. You can, if you're using referral events, you can take advantage of those here via workflows. You can add somebody to a list. You can add them to lists by using tags. You can remove somebody from a list. You can remove them from lists similarly with tags. You can remove people from workflows. You can assign to campaigns. So there's a whole variety of things, again, that we would want to do with somebody based upon the actions that they took. What I've done here is create a series of activities that, number one, this first action in the workflow says, just after the start of this workflow being triggered, I want to send a notification email to myself, and I'm also going to send myself a text message. And what this does is it just sends me kind of a pre-built form letting me know that, hey, somebody filled out a form, for example, and I'll get that notification via my email. And it's just kind of a heads-up thing. Conversely, I could send myself a particular email or do anything similar. What I'm also doing as part of this workflow is 5 minutes after this workflow triggers, I am going to send this email that we've constructed, and I'm going to send it to the recipient who is that completed the task that triggered this workflow. And then 5 minutes after the start, I'm going to add anybody who I applied this workflow to. I'm going to add them to this list we've created called Team Red. So I've got 3 things going on here. If I wanted to, I could also, for example, send a notification email to any of the users within my system here. I could remove somebody from a workflow, for example. I'm just going to arbitrarily pick this. For example, if I wanted to then add an additional action, let's say based upon the action somebody took, but I don't want them to be part of an existing workflow, I can add that. And so once this workflow triggers, all these things would happen in this sequence. So yeah, there's a whole variety of things you can do here. You can change lead fields. You can change lead status. Let's say you've got all your leads in your system as unqualified, but then based upon a set of actions you want to change their status to qualified, you could do that. For example, if I pick that field, I could then say, hey, I want them to be qualified, and I could add that action. So I've got a pretty complicated, well, not really complicated, but I've got a sequence of activities that, again, are things I want to do with my leads. I'm going to save those changes. Now what I want to do is go back to my set of tasks, and I'm going to pull up this Bootcamp webinar task that I created earlier today. And what this task says, again, just to reinforce, is when somebody visits this important page that we've created called Contact, they visit it one time, and they've come from this particular email. So I'm not just catching anybody who comes to this page. I'm catching only those people who came from this email, because I had a particular focus group I sent this email to, and I want to trigger a workflow to people who've said they're part of team color red. Imagine they picked a certain product, or they provided a certain value in a field. They said they're a company of a certain size, or interested in or part of a particular industry. That's when you can use this has a certain field with a value. So anybody who meets all of these criteria, this and this and this, what I want to do is trigger the workflow that I had just created. And in this particular case, I selected the test workflow, but I could go back and actually I'm going to delete this one. And for that, oh, there it is. Send congrats and notify jury workflow. And for your convenience, SharpSpring will show you right here what all the steps in that workflow are. That way you can be reassured that, yes, indeed, this is what I want to happen. So anybody who meets all of these criteria, we're then going to do this. We're going to send a notification to Jerry. We're going to remove people from Jerry's test workflow. We're going to change their lead status to qualified. 5 minutes after this triggers, we're going to send them this congratulations email, and we're also going to add them to the Team Red list. So in this way, you can see you can do all kinds of fun stuff here. You can even kind of gang up workflows together. So if you've got a need, you've got kind of some niche stuff going on with your workflows, you can assign multiple workflows to a set of tasks. And in this way, this is where you can repurpose workflows. If you once you get a little bit savvy, if you build them in kind of a general way, you can repurpose. For example, we many times have kind of notification type workflows set up that we repurpose over and over for clients, because in many cases it's a common set of marketing and/or executives who want to be notified when something happens. So we'll repurpose workflows over and over again. If you, by chance, apply the wrong workflow, you can delete it here. If, let's say, you built a task and you're like, oh, I need to create a workflow now, you can just use this new workflow feature and bump over and walk through the process of creating your workflow. Again, there's that Make Available in Contact Manager option, which I turn on by default. You can click Add Workflow here, and then you would walk through the whole sequence of building out your workflow. So it's that easy. You would save this then. And then we can bump back to that task and then assign that workflow too. So that's kind of the down and dirty of workflows, the basic steps. As with anything in these automation sequences, we always advise that you test stuff before you go actually pull the trigger and make it go live. Especially with tasks, they have various combinations of Boolean logic and or combinations that can get a little complicated sometimes. But yeah, the things to keep in mind are, again, workflows are what we want to do with people, and they usually involve sending emails, sending follow-up emails, sending notification emails, assigning people to campaigns, assigning them to lists, and or removing them from campaigns and lists. So that's the basics of workflows. I'll give another minute or so to see if we get any questions coming in. I don't see that we have yet. Just a heads up to folks, we've constructed these webinars to be kind of topic specific each week. This is our third one. We have another one coming up next week, and then I think what we're going to do the week after that is kind of have an open forum webinar where we'll have a topic in our back pocket if we need to conduct or to present on. But what we're thinking of doing is maybe allowing our attendees to bring questions, concerns, examples, whatever, to kind of like an open forum. We could kind of have an open dialogue going. People can talk, ask questions, share ideas, present your problem cases. It's kind of kind of typical stuff that we might want to say to you, hey, buy a little service package from us, and we'll gladly help you with that stuff. But maybe the webinar in a couple of weeks will allow you that opportunity to get some free, webinar phone support from us around any kind of issues you're having. So having said that, again, we thank you for participating. Last things last again. I'm Jerry. This is my compatriot here. If you have any questions or any needs, by all means give us a call. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you next week.